So I just want to welcome everyone today to the first of 3 sessions with Chris Brady, Creating the Calm. And we're really so lucky to have her with us today. What a crazy time we're living in. But she is here for the next 3 weeks to share with us how we can create a more calm atmosphere in our homes while we're juggling all these different new roles that we're experiencing in the world today. So I'll let Chris introduce herself and share a little bit more about her journey to getting here. And Chris, over to you.
Okay, thank you. So thanks so much for being here. I know it's really difficult right now to get even an hour to yourself, even 10 minutes to yourself. Everyone's got their kids at home and you're juggling jobs, and on top of it, you're a regular parent that has everything to do. And I really do thank you so much for taking this time, because it's so important that we take care of ourselves during this time. Our kids learn directly from our behavior. They will learn more from your behavior than they'll learn from anything, any great deep conversation you think you've had with them. It is your daily behavior that will ring true for them in their adult life. And so however we are showing how this is affecting us, they see that, and so we really want to make sure that we're able to take care of ourselves. So I really wanted, Joanna and I had talked about doing something like this like a year ago, and some different things came up in my life with going through the foster care system and adoption, which was wonderful, but it just wasn't a great time for me. And when all of this happened, I thought we've got to do this something right now. And I want to talk about all of our new roles today. I'm talking, yes, you're a teacher right now, you're the mom, you're still the chef and the housekeeper, of course, but you're also, for some of you, you're the special education teacher, you're the speech therapist, you're the counselor, whoever your child was seeing on a daily basis, you are now that person, and you are expected. There are deadlines for us. We're basically like a personal secretary as well for all of these little people, including ourselves. And that to me is just kind of mind-boggling, because right now is a time where we don't need all of the extra emotional stress. We need actually to be focusing in on what's really important. This is a time in our lives that will never, ever happen again. And when we look at what this has done to us as a society, I mean, yes, we can look on the news and check out, the politics of it all and the kind of hyper anxiety that people are getting into, because we live so much in our minds. But it's also allowing us to take a look at how much we consume, financially, physically, what we're reading, that's consuming as well. Are we reading the news that's beneficial to us, or are we reading news that only helps to heighten our anxieties? And so it's a time to really kind of shift our focus, and I want to talk more about that today. Excuse me. I want to talk about the opportunity in this chaos, and there's so much opportunity that is available to us right now because of what has happened. And I want us to really focus on that side of things instead of what we feel we're losing. And then we're going to go into how these opportunities, how we can kind of access them. And we're going to talk a little bit about mindfulness. So there's 3 sessions to this workshop, and we're going to delve a little more deeply into mindfulness in the last session. But I really want to get kind of an overview of what it is, and if you're interested, that's wonderful. It doesn't. It's not a religious. You don't have to have any kind of religious belief in order to do mindfulness. It's just kind of a self-care, really, and wellness. So as I was saying, some of our new roles that we can now put on our resume, you know, the teacher, the therapist, the occupational therapist, the speech therapist. You know, I've got 4 children of my own, and my youngest is 3. And so that's also a daycare provider, and, you know, making sure that she has something to do while the others are doing, excuse me, while the others are doing their homework and I'm doing my work. It's a lot. And she's very, you know, hyperactive. So we're going, you know, it's been difficult to do all of that. Some of our new fears. We want to talk about this, and today I want you to be able to ask questions that are very candidly. There's really nothing that that will surprise me or will shock me. I've been working with students of all ages. Mostly right now I work with teens and adults, but I've been doing this for almost 20 years. And I mean, normally when I see a teenager, it's because they have been in trouble with the law, and so, you know, it's kind of this, it's an urgency. There's an urgency to get help now, and that's where our fears are right now. You know, some of us may have been thinking, oh, you know, what are my kids going to do when they get into college? Or, you know, we have these kind of distant fears. And what COVID has done is really brought those fears closer to home, because now things are different. I mean, even going to the grocery store, that's now a fear. You know, we actually have to be scared of touching things and not wearing a mask, or those people who aren't wearing a mask, or people may have sneezed in that aisle, so should I walk down it? I mean, things that we didn't ever have to think about before. And these aren't just thoughts for us. These are thoughts that our children are now experiencing in their short little lives when, you know, we would have never had to think about things like this when we were younger. And then so our solutions are more immediate. And it's not that they're different solutions, but we have to come up with ways of actually implementing them now and being more preventative than reactive in our future fears. So let's talk about our emotions right now, because I think that's kind of first and foremost. I've been, you know, I get different alerts. I have different Google alerts set up on my business account so that I can read up on, you know, neurodiversity mostly, but the anxiety levels that people are experiencing right now. And it's not just anxiety, it's anger and it's frustration, and it's a level of emotion coupled with a situation that we've never had to experience. And when we put the two together and we don't really have any strategies available to us to regulate any of that, we're seeing huge increases in child abuse. So, you know, this is very proven. Normally, hospitals see the increases in ICU care for children who have been abused at home during the summer months. It happens every summer, and I know this, you know, for some of you this might be new information, and it's awful. But this is the reality. When the children are home more frequently, and the parents don't have any strategies to cope with their own emotions, then this is what the result is. And so we're seeing that hike now. And so I just put on here, so health experts at, you know, community medical centers say the last economic downturn between 2007 and 2009 resulted in a 65% increase and that was just in head trauma. And that's over the entire 2-year period. And just this past March, Children's Hospital in Fort Worth, Texas, reported 7 cases of severe child abuse and 2 deaths in only 1 week. So, and typically that hospital sees over the course of a month sees many cases over the course of a month, and a total of 6 deaths over the entire year from abuse. And so in a week, they've already seen 2 deaths. And so it's not just, and this isn't to say that, any of the people on here are, walking a fine line between abusing their children or already doing so, but this is the reality of our situation. And these aren't, typically these are not, what we say is, bad parents. These are parents who are in situations that they aren't capable of handling. And this is what COVID has kind of done to us, is put us in a situation where we may not be ready to handle all of these emotions, and whether it's anxiety or anger or, sadness, whatever it is, there's an abundance of it, and you're stuck in your home. And so it's even harder, because before you could get out, you could breathe, and your kids could get out and breathe. So just really getting to the reality of how bad this is. So we want to talk about anxiety because it's probably the one that's coming up the most right now. People who already have some type of general anxiety disorder are seeing that heightened sense of fear. And so when we talk about anxiety, that not feeling prepared, so we don't have the information that we need. We're constantly seeking for, well, what if, and what's going to happen when? We don't have any answers. And even the people that we normally look to for answers, our experts, our scientists, they don't have any either. And that's really scary for a lot of people, and if you've already were having difficulties with this, to not be able to go somewhere and get some type of information that relieves your anxiety is really scary. So anxiety is a fear of the unknown. And some people experience anxiety when they're going to a new place because they've never been to that place. And so, sometimes we can help them along with going to the place the day before and kind of figuring out where they need to be. And, we do a lot of that when we're transitioning students, especially autistic students. And that tends to help a lot. Test anxiety is a major one. If you have a child who suffers from test anxiety, normally they blank out during the test. And a lot of the reason, sorry, my kids are yelling, a lot of the reason there is because they feel unprepared, like they don't know the answers, and they're not going to know the answers. And most of the time, that's actually because they aren't able to study in a way that makes sense to them, in a way that they're able to retain the information. But we can talk about that another time. But that's normally the reason. It's not that they didn't study; they don't really understand what studying is, and especially with their brain. So anxiety likes to trick us. It tricks us into believing that thoughts are real. And our thoughts are never real. They are thoughts. I mean, I can have a crazy thought about, killing someone. I mean, anyone can think of these crazy thoughts. They're not reality. They are just thoughts. And it's the same when you take something of, that magnitude or something that is simple. These are merely thoughts. And what happens is that we get so caught up in living in our minds and having that internal dialogue loop and loop and loop constantly, all day it goes. And it's so when we allow it to continually loop, it reinforces our anxiety. It reinforces those fears because it tends to tell us, well, that's the truth then. That thought is real. That is, that is the logic. And it's not. It's not at all. So it makes us believe that we are not a part of the solution, and this is huge. When you are constantly looking to something else to someone else to feel secure, to feel safe, to feel like you have some kind of connection with reality, that's a very dangerous place to be, because that means that it is not inside of you and you don't believe that it is inside of you. So what people are experiencing now obviously is incredibly magnified to anything that they've experienced before. And what we want to do is basically create a little space, okay? And this is actually, it is a part of mindfulness really, is that we're creating a space between what happens and our response to what happens. And so when we have, when we have a kid at home right now who might be experiencing anxiety or is really having some trouble with doing all of their work independently, the opportunity in that, and I really want you to think about, I want you to see the difficulty as it is a difficulty for them, and we acknowledge that it is a difficulty for them always, okay, that it is imperative that we do that because we never want to minimize their difficulties. But acknowledging that and saying, okay, the opportunity here lies in what am I able to notice about my child right now, and what can he or she learn about themselves right now in this that's going to help them for the rest of their lives. So when we're having difficulty with the transitioning, we sit down and say, okay, what part of this transition is really difficult for him? Where is he struggling the most? And then we can kind of zero in, because it's not the entire thing. There are parts of this that are amazing for a lot of our kids. And so we want to make sure that we're focusing in on what is the actual difficulty here, and then we can come up with strategies to help with that specific thing. So looking at, what does each child really need, and each kid is going to experience this very differently. But focusing in on, I've got, like I said, I have 4 children, and 2 of them right now are kind of in the process of learning to read. And so we have all of these videos coming home with really great content on learning how to read. And I'm grateful for them. But, even though between those 2 kids, they're at very different stages for how well they're going to be able to retain this information and learn to read. And this is a time for me to really see that, because I don't get to see that in the classroom. I don't know how they're doing with those things exactly. I know that one is not able to read and one is starting to read, but I don't really understand the behind the scenes information of what that means. And so the opportunity in that, because it's a really difficult thing for me to have to sit down with them every day and do this, because there's a lot of video content and it's very hands-on for the parents. And so for me, I have to say, okay, what is the opportunity here? And I really get to cater exactly what each child needs and really give them those wins. When something small happens, I wouldn't have seen that at school. I would have never seen that at school. They would have had small wins. Their teacher, may have said something, I don't know, but I wouldn't have seen that. And getting that from mom or dad is much greater than getting that from teacher. And it might be a good idea to, if you could maybe just type in the chat, if you have a teenager, because you're probably going to have different ideas and questions, and I can kind of talk to those along the way. Or if you have a younger child, that would be helpful.
So just place in the chat the ages. So we've got 10,
Yeah.
7, and 4.
Okay.
We've got 2 teens, younger
Okay.
children, 2 under 5, 4 and 6, and a 15-year-old teenager.
Okay.
8 months,
So,
7 and 9, 8, 6, and 3.
okay. So most of you are have younger children, and then I think there's about 3 teenagers. So okay, so I'll speak to both of those in the skills that we're developing. So the skills that I want to talk about are called executive functioning skills, and they are the most important skills that you can develop. Now, if your child has ever had an IEP, if they had a psych ed assessment, a psychological educational assessment, and they were assessed with a ADHD or autism or sensory processing disorder or even anxiety, these are all kind of neurodiversity labels. They come under the neurodiversity umbrella. And what that means is if you went through their psych ed assessment, you would notice that in a lot of the executive functioning skills, they are lacking in their ability to prioritize, to self-regulate, especially emotionally. They often grow up, and specifically to your teenagers, with a very inaccurate sense of their self-worth because they're highly intelligent, but they're assessed in a way that is very standard and doesn't allow for their gifts to shine through and their talents to shine through. So, so their independence often is lagging because they don't get the same practice as a neurotypical child. The neurotypical child they have developed social skills that are going to be superior by a certain age because they've had more opportunities to develop those social skills as well. But it's also in the executive functioning, learning to take turns when to in conversation or raising their hand, or these are all things that other kids notice too, and can be a detriment if not done properly. And so these are some of the skills that we really want to focus on right now, and that's part of the opportunity in this. I've worked at the college level and university level for several years now, and the greatest lacking in skill development is in the executive functioning, the ability to, even when we take the simple word prioritize, it's not just about, prioritizing which task should come first. It's how do they take notes? Because most of them, A, don't take notes, or B, they take the worst notes possible because they don't know how to prioritize which information is actually more important than the rest. And so it's thinking about things like that when you're talking to your kids and being very direct in, so what did I say? Can we think of a way where you can tell me, exactly what needs to be done without it sounding like, sometimes it can come across very negative when we get them to repeat something, and so we don't want that to happen, but we want to make sure that they're understanding, that they know what needs to be done, and that we're practicing that ability to prioritize what needs to be done now. Did something just happen? Are we okay?
Oh, yeah, you're fine. Yep.
Okay, sorry about that. And prioritizing what task needs to be done, but also being able to retain, even 2 steps of information, or being able to, get to the end of the hallway, grab the towel, and get back to you before they get distracted with something else. And if you have a child with ADHD, you know what I'm talking about, they're very highly distracted. And so these types of practicing of these skill development is so essential. And they don't get this at school because it's in a group setting. And so they're constantly distracted. They don't get to develop these skills the way that they need to be developed, which is one-on-one. And so this is that time. And is that more important than their homework? I'm going to be really honest. Yes, because long term, that is what's going to set them apart. That is what is going to give them that better sense of self-worth, because they're going to feel more confidence in their abilities to do these things that they see other kids able to do. And so these are the opportunities that I'm talking about. And I know, I'm not saying that this is easy, but I'm saying this is where we have to really sift out for ourselves what is really important right now and what isn't. I personally sent emails to all of my children's teachers last week. And, that's the speech therapist and the OT and the counselor and the 3 regular teachers and the special education teacher. They all got an email. And it basically said, this is my situation right now. I believe that you understand how busy we are as parents taking all of this on. And I just need you to know that these are the things I'm going to focus on for each child. And I'm very aware of, where my children do well and where they don't do well. I'm very, very realistic with my expectations of those things. And I really just kind of laid it out. And I got, a couple of responses that we'll call slightly judgmental. But to me, it does not matter. I have the ability to say no. I actually have the ability to do nothing at all on any of those homework sheets. But I'm choosing to keep them in contact with their friends and with their teachers, and I think that those relationships are important. And so I do want to do that, but I have to be very realistic with what I'm capable of taking on and what matters to me the most. And, the kids are missing out here in Colorado on, 2 months of school. That's not really a significant amount of time when you look at the amount of filler information they would have received and the amount of essential information they would have received. And that's what I'm really talking about. So the next one, sorry, I tend to talk a lot about this topic, so I apologize if I go over a bit. So the opportunity for you. So this isn't just a time for us to, work on what our kids need. This is a time for us to really look at the types of expectations we have put on ourselves. Usually other people's expectations or what we think other people expect from us. And it's a time to really call that out and say, I understand that you're expecting this because maybe the school board's expecting that. I don't care. This is what I am capable of doing. These are the realistic expectations. And this is essential for you to do as a parent because your kids, like I said, they're taking on your behaviors. And so if you're teaching them, and I know it sounds like a lot of mom guilt, and I don't mean it to be like that, but this is why it's so important to take care of yourself and to learn to say no, because your children are going to learn to take on these exterior or external expectations that don't actually come with a lot of meaning for them. And there's there's so much to be said for an adult who is able to draw the line and just say, I can't do this. And if I get extra time, maybe I can if you feel that's necessary. But I really feel this is the time to really just cut through the crap and see exactly where your life is right now. And for you, not for your child, for you. How much are you putting on yourself? And this might be, a very emotional experience to think about, what your family puts on you. And this, I mean brothers and sisters and parents, what your immediate family, your children and your husband or wife puts on you, and then what you actually internalize as what you think your job is every day and how you think you're supposed to look or behave. So the expectations around what you're realistically capable of doing. Learning what you can teach and what can be outsourced. So one thing I did last week, and we're going to talk about this in the next session, is talking about goals. Goal setting is so incredibly important. And so with my kids, we sat down and we did some goal setting. And a couple of them really wanted to learn piano this year. And I had, put off the lessons. We did some last year, and we had other, Cub Scouts and other things that we were involved in. And I don't like being involved in a ton of things after school, like at all. So, so I said no to the piano this year. And what I thought about was this is actually a really good opportunity, again, to there was an ad for Udemy. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but it was like $12, and it's a learn how to play the piano, and it had like 34,000 reviews. So I'm thinking, okay, this is something that we can, during the homeschooling time, we can start to work on. That's a personal goal. So, you take that iPad for this session and you go and start that. I don't know how to play the piano. And so that's something I need to outsource. It's important to them. It gives them a great break during the day. It's teaching them that there is a difference between personal and academic goals, and how to be independent in achieving them. So, looking at things like that and where is the opportunity in it? And like I said, online learning right now is incredible. I was reading an article the other day. It's shot up 285%, like sales in online learning resources since last March because of this crisis that we're in right now. So, there's some really great content out there that you can grab for your kids, and just have them experience independence in doing that too. You don't need to be a part of everything that they're doing. And so seeing your child's difficulties from another perspective, and this is really, when I was talking about that transition that they're going through, you're getting a chance right now to experience how difficult transitioning is. And if you normally don't have any difficulties with transitioning, you're able to just kind of go with the flow throughout the day, and if things change, you easily adapt. Really taking a look at how well you adapted to this, and what were some of the difficulties you had, and even writing those out and sharing them with your child, especially if this is a child with anxiety, who experiences difficulties with transitioning, or any other part of what's going on right now that you didn't really understand before. And having that conversation with them and being like, you know what, I thought I kind of understood what you were going through before, and I know I can't, personally understand exactly what you're experiencing, but these are some of the difficulties that I found in, transitioning from being able to go to work and see friends and have that commute where I have alone time and listen to music and, grab a coffee, to being at home all day, every day. And this is this is what I'm really struggling with. How do you sometimes cope with some of these things? And just allowing them to see that you're trying to understand, and that you are being very honest in experiencing difficulties as well, which is wonderful, especially if you have teenagers, really opening up. Um, and just saying, allowing them to kind of be the teacher for the day and say, in this, yeah, I've had those troubles too, and sometimes I just shut down, or, and really talking about some of the strategies that both of you can work on in that. So some of the opportunities, there's plenty of other opportunities, but those are really the most significant. So how can they develop these skills? So we're talking about all of these, executive functioning skills and, independence and prioritizing and time management. And what we want to look at here, and I know I'm talking to a lot of military families right now, so you understand the power that you have, especially as a mother. And again, I will say that your happiness matters the most in the entire family. You know what? I'll send you the link to the studies that were done for what I just said, and that link the happiness of the mother to the ability of the child to adapt throughout their life. And it's so imperative that you understand how important it is for you to be happy, not fake happy, not getting through it with a smile on, but to be genuinely content with what is currently going on because you feel like you have the ability to take it on. And the support that you need, that's great if there's external support as well, but the support that you truly need is inside of you. And I know, some people may think that sounds very cliched, but it's actually extraordinarily significant. And your children really do pick up on how happy you are, and not just because sometimes we yell or or leave the room on them. That's normal. Okay, those things happen. It's the everyday state. It's the ability to talk openly about things, because that also shows someone's happiness or their sadness in having to keep things in or to hide things that they think they shouldn't have to worry about or they shouldn't be fearful of. Practicing the thoughts versus reality. Okay, this is really a wonderful, wonderful tool. And what you can do is really, when they're having difficulties or when you're having difficulties, really saying out loud, these are the thoughts I'm having right now. I'm thinking that this is never going to end. I'm thinking I'm going to be stuck in here for at least a year. I'm thinking that, my whole family's going to get sick from just going to the grocery store. I'm thinking that, maybe my parents, I'm worried about, your grandparents and if they're going to die. Like, all of these things are going through our minds. These are our thoughts. And then talking directly about what are the facts. And I know that you might say, okay, we don't have a lot of facts, but the fact for the first one, I feel like this is going to never end. We know that it's going to end. We may not have a direct, an exact date, but we know that everything comes to an end. This will come to an end. And in the meantime, what can we do to keep our minds off of the difficulties that we're experiencing, right? And that's going back to, what are the opportunities in this chaos? What are the opportunities in this situation or difficulty that you're experiencing right now? So really getting them to think about, and especially when I work with, you know, anxiety is so prevalent in North America in general. You know, we're seeing it as early as 4 and 5 years old. And we really want to be able to give them these skills now so that they practice this throughout their life and they don't have to experience the intense anxiety of constantly living inside of their heads. They have some type of skill to get out of their head and say, okay, I wrote down my thoughts. These are the things that I've been going through. And now I need the fact sheet because I need to get back to reality. I need to get outside of my head. And again, if you are practicing this and you're open about it, that's even better because they are going to pick up on that. So forming stability in unstable times. So what are some of the things that you can do right now? And I know as military spouses or personnel, you know about having an unstable environment because, you know, we often don't know when we're going to move. And even when we get a posting message, something like this comes up and we might be staying. So there are so many uncertainties. So what are some of the things that we can create in our day-to-day right now that form stability enough to feel a sense of security in that? And that might be a routine. It might be, you know, weekly conversations about what's going on, whatever it is that's working for you. And I mean, we can open these up to questions afterward and what your specific child needs the most. So all of these things really, you know, setting them up for success. We have, you know, showing them how to reach out. When I do a lot of transitioning, especially for families, we talk about how do the parents reach out? How do they show their children that, like, how they're transitioning? So when they get to the new place, how are they reaching out to get help? Do they ever ask for help? Or do they just think that they're supposed to take it on all by themselves? And really understanding how much of that your child is taking on. They are learning that behavior. And it's so important that we learn to say, me, please. Let's ask some questions. Let's have really honest conversations because we are not the only ones experiencing anything that you are experiencing. You are definitely not the only one experiencing it. So making sure that you know the reality of that and teaching that to your kids. So we'll talk about mindfulness. Oh, and the setting them up, sorry, if I could go back, setting them up for success. This, I should have put little quotation marks around setting. So what I'm really talking about there is the homeschool environment. And really, you know, you're noticing now, probably more than ever, how much your children struggle with independence or homework or certain subjects like math or reading. And now that you're noticing, now that you have this opportunity to really notice these difficulties, setting up the environment to help mitigate them. So, you know, if you have a kiddo who's, you know, really highly distractible, you know, making sure that wherever they're doing their homework, they're not around all of the other children. They're not, you know, right in front of a window where they can daydream all day. You know, I mean, obviously you want them close to a window, but not, you know, really understanding this is what you need right now, just while you do homework. I know a lot of my students with, especially with ADHD, do really, really well studying content when they have music blaring in their ears. I have no idea how they do it, but the difference is unbelievable from what they're able to retain when listening to music and when they're not listening to music. So really taking on board, talking to them. What do you need right now to make sure that this is as successful as possible? Because I need to give that to you, and you need to learn it so that when you get out into the work world, you know what you need in order to get your work done. Okay, you're not going to be constantly doing the wrong things for you. Okay, so we'll just talk really briefly about mindfulness, and then we are going to open it up to some questions. So Jon Kabat-Zinn is he is a neuroscientist. He is kind of the one who is attributed with bringing mindfulness over to Western civilization to the magnitude that you see it today. And he developed the first MBSR program, the mindfulness-based stress reduction, and Berkeley still uses it. They have a community, I think it's called Greater Good, where they have taken on this program, and they teach children and do countless studies, mostly on adults, how mindfulness has affected adult anxiety or the ability to focus and things like that. And so his quote on what is mindfulness is, it means paying attention in a particular way on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally. And so what all of that means is that a lot of times mindfulness is kind of just deemed as meditation, and people think, oh, I can't do that. I can't sit still long enough to meditate or be in a white room, or I've got kids running around the house. Like, what, are you crazy? I'm not going to be able to be mindful during these moments. So mindfulness is not that. And it's so important to know that, okay? This is the most practical form of wellness that you can implement in your day, especially if you are a super busy, stressed out parent. I went through the mindfulness program. Well, I learned about mindfulness about 6 years ago, and I was working in a college at the time, and we were actually taking on a initiative. We were bringing in tons of apprentices, so plumbers and electricians and welders and hairstylists and chefs, any of the apprentice programs. We were bringing them into the Canadian colleges, and they had to go through this 8 or 10-week course and then test for their Red Seal certification. And if you didn't attain this, you might not have a job to go back to. So very stressful situations that these men and women were being placed in, and financially as well, because they had to go off of their regular pay in order to come to school, receive unemployment. And so it was very stressful. And for a lot of these apprentices, these are hands-on learners. These are your men and women who are insanely intelligent, but who did not test well in elementary or high school because it was all reading and writing. They didn't get to show their abilities, okay? And there's a huge difference there, as we know. And so just being back in a classroom is kind of like their own little hell. Being forced to sit down for that amount of time, getting a textbook that is, unbelievably thick and saying, you got 2 weeks to read through this. There's no online something that can read it out to you. There's nothing. And so we were getting a lot of apprentices coming in really stressed, really angry. And I mean, some anger I've never really experienced, at least not from a stranger. So, and we kind of thought, we know about, some of the learning disabilities that they were experiencing and learning differences. So dyslexia, ADHD, highly prevalent. but the amount of stress on top of it, we had to cut through it in order to get to the learning difficulties, and we couldn't. The anger was so prevalent, we could not get through to the learning difference and teach them. And so we implemented a mindfulness program. And in order to do that, I had to actually learn about mindfulness. And so I took the course, and it was the most life-changing thing I've ever done. And not just because I'm a very fiery person. I'm not, my husband is definitely the logical one. He's the one that I go to when I need to, find reason in something. And me 6 years ago, I thought, oh, I cannot go through this program. This is going to be the worst thing ever. When we started implementing it, okay, so I started, I had to implement it into my own life, obviously, in order to teach it properly. And I really resisted for a long, long time. But when I finally let go, when I finally said, okay, this is going to make things different for me. And we started teaching these men and women. We have never seen any form of therapy at that level work the way that this did. It was the number one thing that these men and women were coming back for every single week, because it was making such a difference, not just in how they responded to the stress of their new academic life, but they were coming in with information about their relationships with, their wives, their children, their driving. They weren't getting as enraged driving in, and so we're able to kind of sit down and actually learn the information from the get-go instead of, being stuck up here the entire time. And so this changed so much for us, and we, went on to develop that program further. But the reason I tell this story is because we took some of the most angry and stressed out men and women I have ever seen, and not just worked with, ever seen. And that's the only thing we did, was implement mindfulness, okay? And it wasn't, intense sessions. These were, if we had 20 minutes, we would do 20 minutes with them. If we had 10 minutes, they would come in for 10 minutes, anything. So the reason I'm telling you that is because these are things that we can implement into our days as well. And the three components of mindfulness, so we have attention, intention, and attitude. And these are the three things that you notice the change in the most. So your attention in noticing things that you did not notice before. And this is when I talk about, where's your kid really struggling right now? Where are you really struggling right now? Are you actually taking note of specifically where it is? Because most often we do not at all. We get through our lives very on what is called autopilot, just going along with the same things that we've always done, even, regardless of how our body is feeling about them, because we don't take note of our body. We don't listen to our body. We think that our mind has all of the answers. With all of our crazy thoughts going on, we actually think that that is the best source of information. And sometimes we need to actually take a moment to listen to our body and to experience what's going on inside of the body right now, and what have we not been listening to? What have we not been paying attention to? And we feel that when we're talking to our kids about certain subjects, and we see the difficulty that they're having, and we can even feel it physically for them, that high anxiety or stress. The intention is, it's almost like setting a goal. It's an intention to, to find peace in that moment, or, it's just a very small kind of goal setting that starts the mindful process, because we have all of these expectations of what we're supposed to be doing, but what was our intention going in? And so as we talked about the expectations before, you can see how helpful it is to cultivate this sense of intention so that we can differentiate between what was our intention going into this and what was the expectation that we were constantly trying to live out. And then our attitude. And like I said before, my attitude going into my mindfulness program was not amazing, and I just resisted. And it's that when we go back to John Kabat-Zinn's definition, non-judgmentally, how much are we judging every single day, whether it's ourselves, whether it's other people, whether it's the situation that we're in? It's a constant barrage of judgment. And really looking at how much is that judgment helping us, if at all? And what are those judgments? And why do we have these automatic judgments? What are they protecting? So let's go into, this is the noticing. We're protecting a sense of noticing in a huge way, because it's a lot easier in some ways to go through life on this automatic mode of just believing that what we're doing is good. You know, everything's okay, we're getting through, so it must be all right. But really actually taking notice that what isn't all right and what isn't all right for your kid, and having those conversations and noticing those conversations and what not just what they're saying, but what their body is saying as well. And so we're taking note of, in mindfulness, our breathing, the environment around us that can often trigger behaviors, as we know ourselves, but definitely for our kids too. The bodily sensations that come along with our emotions, where are you feeling that anger? And really calling it out. This is another thing that we're learning in mindfulness, because oftentimes we just push it aside. We just think it's okay, it's normal to have that sitting there. We don't even actually mostly recognize it. We just get on with our day. What we've noticed a lot is the ability to focus on one thing. So we do things like there's different exercises you can do. But there's one that I really like to use on my kids, especially before bedtime. And one of my kids in particular, we started about 2 years ago with her, because bedtime's a really difficult time for her. And it's called a body scan. And so basically we focus on one part of the body, and we incrementally go up, from the toes up to the head. And, you're teaching them that, of course, your mind is like a monkey. You're going to be all over the place. You're going to be thinking about a million things and then trying to come back to the toe, or, and then thinking about something else and then trying to come back to the toe. And that's normal. That's totally, absolutely normal. And all you're doing right now is you're noticing. How often do you tend to go out, right? And this is so great for your kids in class, because they start to understand, how often do I actually stop listening to the teacher, right? And in a regular math class, I've had students who we give them recording devices, because when they're sitting there in a classroom setting, they listen to almost nothing. They might catch the first 5 minutes and then they're out, and they might come back to pick up the homework, but that's pretty much it. And so if they have that recording device, we have something that they can actually go back to. But I mean, and that's at the college level, and for younger kids, it can be even more difficult, right? So it's really, you're learning so much about your ability to pay attention, and especially to just one thing at a time. And the more we practice something, the more we notice it and often get better at it. So sorry I went a little over, but I'd like to open it up to questions right now. I'd also like to say before we leave that I'm going to start a Facebook group, and I would love for all of you to be a part of it. And what I would like to do is have Q&A sessions every week to help each other through this. And really, you might call in with something like, my kid did this week, and we've never seen this behavior, and, whatever it is, just to really speak candidly about everything and get some practical tips on how to help them and help yourself through it. And so I'm going to, I might ask Joanna afterward. I don't have a link right now to it, but maybe if there's a way that we can collect everyone's email address and I can send it out, the invite out to everyone, and anyone who would like to join can do that, and then we'll kind of just hopefully make this a weekly thing.
Absolutely, yeah, we'll just do that for you.
Thank you very much.
So did you want to go ahead and open it up to questions and answers then?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry about that.
Okay, no, that's okay. That's all right. So I'll just sort of make some comments, like based off of just some things that we were talking about, throughout the presentation. I really feel like what you said there towards the end about, judgment, like we're just so bombarded with judgment. And I really think that that is one of the hardest things that we're having to deal with at any time in this current life that we live, in this particular time in history. And I think that on top of that, it's like it's all added now with what's happening with the coronavirus. And so, I mean, just like you hear stories about you're a single mom, you have no one to watch your kids, so you're having to take your child to the grocery store and then start yelling at you and making you feel bad, and you're just trying to get food. And if you're wearing a mask, you're bad. If you're not wearing a mask, you're bad. If you're, like, are you teaching your kids with structure during the day, or are you just letting them play all day? And it just seems like it's just an overwhelming judgment and trying to find your priority in the midst of that. And so I guess I would just ask, like, I'm sure everyone here has felt it, other than just totally staying off of social media and staying out of all of that, how do you cut through all of that noise? Like, what do you do to cut through that noise of you're doing it wrong, you're not doing it right, it's all bad, it's, and that kind of thing?
So one of the first things that you learn in mindfulness is we go through, so we do a little activity of noticing, usually with food, and just using our 5 senses. And then we go through what's known as mindful bells. And what this is, and this was the one thing that kind of got me in the beginning, because I thought, I can't sit down for 40 minutes and do your little meditation for, every day. I don't have time for this. And, resist. I had an excuse for everything. So really, the judgmental mind is always there. We know that. What mindfulness helps us do, it's not, it's not some miracle drug that, where all of a sudden we're going to wake up and everything's going to be in harmony and we're not going to feel judgment nor give judgment. It's about practicing, just like any of the skills that you're going to be teaching your children for their executive functioning. You also need to develop the skill of thinking, even for 1 minute, 60 seconds, non-judgmentally. And so the first thing to do is to notice how much you are judging yourself and judging others. And most people think, oh, I just do it all the time. I don't want you to have that answer. I want you to have a very specific answer for yourself. You know, so when I'm out, you know, even on a daily basis, I see, you know, someone's outfit, and you know, before in my mind I would have been like, oh, why are they wearing that? Shouldn't be wearing that. And now it's not that it gets rid of that thought. It's that you start to actually notice that you're thinking judgmentally, and that's the first step, is to just take note. Because most of us don't. We just have these automatic judgmental thoughts of everything and everyone we see, and we think it's normal because everyone else is doing it. That's what we feel, right? And so it's taking note first, noticing how often you do it and catching yourself doing it. Then we can step into the mindful bells, and so that gives us you choose something in your daily routine. And so, you know, a lot of people choose brushing their teeth because it's something that you just do automatically. We used to do our commute to work. That was something that we, you know, you just get in the car and you get to work, and often you get there and wonder how you got to work, because we live on autopilot. We just go. We brush our teeth. We're thinking about 8 million other things that we have to do. We are not thinking about brushing our teeth. And so we choose one thing that you do every single day automatically. It never changes. And letting that be your mindful moment. And so it literally can just start with brushing your teeth. And so you take that time, or brushing your hair, and you take that time to use your senses. So you get out of your head. There are no thoughts. We are actually feeling the bristles going through, even, you know, picking up the brush, feeling the handle, taking note of what that feels like in our hand, which hand we normally use. Do we switch hands for the other side? Do we do the top first and then the bottom? Notice, taking note of what is in that moment, just for that moment. Okay? What does it feel like when you hit a knot? What do you normally do to help yourself when you hit that knot? Do you hold your hair? Feeling the bristles on your scalp, noting, you know, how your hair feels after it's been brushed. And just literally, it takes, you know, 2 or 3 minutes, whatever it takes to brush your hair, and usually less. And just taking note of everything your body experiences. And it could be, oh, my arm's tired from brushing it or blow drying it. My legs are tired from standing. My feet hurt. You know, that's okay. That's all a part of that moment. And so we want to bring it just that to the very, very basics. If you start thinking about, you know, something like, you know, well, you know, so-and-so would have her hair look different than this, that's when you've lost and you need to come back, okay? Because as soon as we start analyzing something, that's when we start to judge it, right? And so we want to get out of that judgmental mind, and we want to come back. And so it's just a constant redirection. The same thing you do for your kids when their attention span is gone somewhere else, and you redirect, redirect, redirect. You need to also do that for your own thoughts. And then practice, practice, practice.
Yeah, I like that. And I think it works for the opposite too, not just for judgmental thoughts that you have, but when you hear the judgments of others coming at you, to take that time to don't push those out, push those thoughts out, and focus on what's happening right in front of you. So I really like that a lot, Chris. Thank you so much. Does anybody else have questions for her? You can raise your hand, or you can just type it into the chat. And if I don't see anybody, I just want to ask real fast, is everyone all right with me passing on your emails to Chris just so that she can send you the invite to her Facebook group? And that's the only way we would share it, is just to her so that she could share it. everyone okay? Yes, okay. All right, great, thank you. Okay, perfect. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. We can hang out here for just a few more minutes, but if